Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon on staying engaged, connected, and moving in a virtual world. We are going to wait a couple minutes as attendees continue to file into our virtual room. As we are waiting for everybody to come on in, I will address a couple of things in the chat window. You will see an email, briefing@itslearning.com. If you have questions that come up after the webinar or something did not get answered fully, feel free to send an email to that address. Also in the chat window is a link to our website for our remote learning webinars. They are past webinars if you'd like to watch those, as well as the ability to register for any future webinar. So I will hold for just a little longer as I see more folks popping into our room. Welcome, everyone. Take a seat in our virtual space here. And again, just to reiterate to those folks that are still filing in the chat window, you'll see briefing@itslearning.com. If you have any questions post-webinar or anything that did not get answered to your satisfaction, go ahead and send an email to briefing@itslearning.com. You also have the link to our website on remote learning webinars. You'll see past webinars there, as well as the ability to register for future webinars. All right, so we are at the top of the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Again, this is the webinar called Staying Engaged, Connected, and Moving in a Virtual World. I am Rachel Riggio. I am the Customer Success Manager here at It's Learning. I know that we have all found ourselves in unprecedented times, moving our brick and mortar classrooms into this virtual space. And in doing so, this presents some specific challenges on engaging our students, continuing to connect with students, and getting students still up and moving in this virtual space. So this webinar is for you if you're already working with students in the virtual world. You've moved your brick and mortar classroom to your virtual classroom. This is also for you if you're about to start teaching students in a virtual space. Perhaps your district has decided to go to remote learning. Also for you if your school, district, or organization is still thinking about moving to remote learning but wants to hear a little bit more about how we would go about doing that. By the end of this webinar, you should have some tools to engage students in the virtual space, understand some ways that you can connect with your students still in the virtual world, some tips to get students physically active while they are learning remotely, and learn how important it is to take care of yourself during this time, both physically and mentally. All right. So as we were putting this webinar together, we wanted to first see what people in the field were experiencing. What was the biggest challenge that they had? So we asked some of those folks, and Putnam County Middle School here in Georgia, Sonia said it's definitely the engagement piece for them. This remote distance learning is so new and it can be so stressful for everybody involved that it really takes a lot of support to help folks on this journey. When I reached out to Brenny in Bartholomew, which is in Indiana, she said it's the equity piece for them. So many students don't necessarily have reliable internet access or stable home settings or support at home, and the school is their safe place. So even though they're trying to do their best outreach and support students, it's still really difficult for them to make sure everybody is getting the same experience. Reached out to a district in Texas. They said their biggest challenge was establishing really clear expectations so that everybody knew what was going on. Staff, students, parents knew what was expected of them during this time. They do have a system, It's Learning, and they have a consistent system. So they were able to really just worry about the learning and focusing on that learning and not on the actual tool itself. So without further ado, the recipe for success that we think is to get that engagement piece, get the connection piece, and the movement piece together. And if we do that, if we can engage, if we can connect, if we can help the kids move while they're learning, we will have a recipe for success for teaching in this virtual space. So we're going to take a look at engaging first. And when we're teaching remotely, it's very tricky to engage students, especially if you're not used to doing that. If you're a classroom teacher and you're not used to teaching in a virtual space, it can be very difficult to engage students. So after interviewing teachers that teach in the virtual world mainly, and myself having taught in the virtual world for several years, I think it's really come down to 5 things that we can throw out there for this. And we're going to go into these a little more in depth in just a minute. But the first one would be to get personal with your students. Tap into the students' interests. Number 2, use video, use images, use sound as much as possible in your lessons and interactions with students. Number 3, if you can, incorporate music as much as possible. Nothing engages kids like music. And of course, the music that would be appropriate to the age group that you're teaching, K-12. Number 4, make the day-to-day not so day-to-day. So your processes, your typical processes, can you dress those up a bit? And then the last piece, embracing current trends. What are the kids using in their personal lives, technology-wise, that you can kind of adapt or tap into? So let's talk about this getting personal piece, tapping into students' interests. If you have already done an interest inventory or something like that, which you might have done back in August or September when your students came in, pull those back out and really take a look and see, what are my kids into? What are their interests? What music do they like? What do they like to do typically after school? Where do they want to travel to? What are their hobbies? Those sorts of things that you can group students with like interests and do some things with them, or that you can pull content based on some of their interests. So those inventories, if you haven't done one, go ahead and do one, and you'll get this in your package. You'll get a copy of an interest inventory that you can use as is or modify in any way that you want. And that's going to be a really important piece of getting more personal with the kids. As far as the second piece, using video, images, and sound, I'm going to take one thing. You might think about doing a daily welcome video. So, you're typically used to welcoming kids when they come into your course. Well, in your virtual course, let's try to do that too, and record yourself saying, welcome to Tuesday. Today we're going to do, this, and that, or just, welcome, how's everybody doing? So they can see your face, they can hear your voice, feel your excitement for for teaching, and they can still feel like they're part of that class. Incorporating music. I love to incorporate music in my class. I know kids love music. So I try to think of things that I do in my daily work. And I have an example here of teaching personification as an English teacher. Instead of using a text or a story, you can use a song. And I use The Wind Cries Mary by Hendrix a lot. So we listen to the song so they can hear, Hendrix. We looked at the lyrics, we analyzed the lyrics, and it was something a little bit different, but it was incorporating music. They were listening to the music and connecting with it. Included in this presentation is a direct link to the Rock Hall EDU. If you've never been to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame education section, they have lots and lots of lessons across content areas using popular music throughout history. It's a fantastic site. We talk about making the day-to-day not so day-to-day. So perhaps you have some processes that you typically do. You give exit tickets or bell ringers or something like that. Well, make them a little more novel. Perhaps record a video using a Snapchat filter to give directions for that bell ringer or that exit ticket or that process that you typically do. So kind of thinking out of the box a little bit, how can I make the day-to-day not so day-to-day? And then embracing the current trends. So, think TikTok, think Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, all those things that folks use today. And think about how you can incorporate some of those ideas. For instance, maybe one of your products is a TikTok-like video to detail the causes of the Civil War, or an Instagram account for Edgar Allan Poe. What would that look like? Or what would Harriet Tubman's Facebook feed look like? Something that's a little more novel. It embraces what the kids already kind of know outside school, and they can bring it right into school as well. So if we can think about one or two of those things, even bringing them into this virtual space, we can, really engage the students. So I just pulled some examples of folks out there doing this. On the left-hand side is a 5th grade teacher who is studying economics, finance with her students. What she did was pulled in her husband, who is a banker and he is in finance. So he pre-recorded a video for the students that they could watch. And then afterwards, they participated in a discussion with him, and that's what you're seeing here on the screen is their discussion exchange. But this can also be an excellent time to bring an online meeting together and pull the expert in live that the kids can listen to and interact with. Over on the right-hand side, the red rimmed boxes, that's a teacher who has basically become a YouTuber during this time frame. She does quick little intro videos for the math topic of the day. She highlights what they're doing, reviews some things, presents any possible obstacles to the students. She's usually doing this from her kitchen with a dry erase board. She'll bring in her dog sometimes or her son sometimes. So she makes it very personal. And then down below is a kindergarten teacher who wanted to continue to do her read alouds. So she used Microsoft Teams, and all of her kiddos, all 23 of them, I believe, came on to Microsoft Teams to listen to her read her story. She did say that she's never laughed so hard because she muted all of them, but they figured out how to unmute themselves. So it was a very interactive time for everyone. So these are some teachers who have embraced this different way of engaging their students in the work. So if we move away from engagement and we talk about connection, I think this is the piece that most teachers have expressed concern about to me. I'm so used to coming into my classroom every day, talking to my students, seeing their body language, their facial expressions and all of that. I miss that, or that's something that's missing from my course. There's ways to bring that back into what you do, and I've listed 5 here. So first and foremost would be online meetings. You can do this with an entire class if it's not too big of a class. If it's a bigger class, you might want to divide into groups of 10 for your class meetings. These can be meetings, touch-based meetings, how's everybody doing, what's up, that kind of thing, or they can be very academic, introducing a topic or a concept or reviewing a topic or a concept. There's options out there for doing this. So if you do have It's Learning and you're using the It's Learning platform, we do have a Microsoft Teams integration right in the rich text editor. There's an icon for it that you can launch a meeting there. You can also launch a meeting with Hangouts or the It's Learning conference tool for small groups. If you don't have It's Learning, you can certainly get an online meeting tool that you can use outside in any space. So we also want to continue possibly one-to-one conferences for that personal attention. And lots of teachers have spring conferences with parents as well in the spring. So you certainly could continue those if you wanted to one-on-one. Again, if you do use It's Learning, there is a registration tool built right into It's Learning that your kids can use to register for these conferences. And you can conduct them through Teams, the It's Learning conference tool, FaceTime if that's possible. Third on the list would be discussion forums. These aren't video, but they're text. You can use this for academics, homework discussions, concept discussions, but you can also use it as touch points too. What'd you do this weekend? How was your weekend? Anybody do anything fun in their yard? Kind of thing. And again, this is nice. Our It's Learning discussion tool is nice for that. Fourth on the list would be virtual office hours. So it's really important that the kids have some consistency in schedule, predictability of what's going on, especially in a time like this. So you can establish virtual office hours. So for instance, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, I'm going to be available from 1 to 3 for drop-in conversations, questions, ad hoc sort of meetings. Again, using any tool you really want to, Teams, Hangouts, the It's Learning conference tool. If you don't have any of that, I've even done this over email, and I've told the kids from 1 to 3, I'm going to be sitting on my email that I can respond to you. And then finally, again, coming from one of our primary teachers, she missed her table talks at center time, her small group table talks. So she's like, I'm going to do these table talks still. So she's sitting at her kitchen table. She brings kids in through Teams at their kitchen tables, dining room tables, desks, wherever, and they still continue their table talks. So again, if you can pull in 1 or 2 of these items into your course, you're going to keep some of those connections with the students that we miss so much in a remote space. So just a couple examples of teachers connecting with their kids. You see a large colorful school bus there. This was a middle school teacher who drew this and wrote a personal note and posted it to her kids, basically telling them, you know, this is not ideal, but we're going to get through this together. Below that is an example of what a Microsoft Teams meeting might look like. That's with 2 people. It would be multiple screens if you have more people. Over to the right, we had several 8th grade teachers who put together a little image collage, letting the 8th graders know that they miss them very much and still love them. And then down below, you have our happy, perky middle school teacher here introducing her concepts on her inner kitchen on a short video. So finally, in our connection piece here, if you do use the It's Learning platform, or really any other platform, using an announcement piece where you can tell the students, make sure you're logging in every day, completing your assignments every day, but in addition to that, send me a message to check in. How are you doing personally? How are you doing academically? And I'll count that as kind of your attendance for the day. So another way to check in and to see how the kiddos are doing. So our third piece is movement. We've talked about engagement, we've talked about connection. Let's talk about movement. We know movement is great for the body, it's great for the brain, and we want to keep our kids moving. So I've thought of 3 ways really when I was teaching, and the teachers that I've talked to are in virtual spaces, how they have kind of kept their kiddos moving. So the first one is scavenger hunts, and you can do scavenger hunts K-12. As the students get older, it gets a little trickier to do ones that they'll, you know, actually feel are worth doing. The one I've included in your package that you will get is one for a primary grade level, searching out shapes for a geometry lesson. So they're hunting around their yard and their home for different shapes. Find 2 circles in your bedroom, find a square in the backyard. And even enlisting some relatives. Call up your grandmother and have her find a diamond in her house somewhere. For example. So different ways the kids are learning, the kids are doing their work, but they're moving around. They're not sitting at a computer. The other piece is injecting brain breaks. So perhaps after an assignment, you inject a brain break of, you know, walk around your neighborhood, you know, with your mom, or do 25 jumping jacks and 5 sit-ups. Or if you'd like, there's a website called Go Noodle and other websites like this that host movement videos. So you can actually embed or link a movement video in between the assignments or activities that the students are doing. And then finally, trying to, in the products that students give you or the practice that they're doing, incorporate movement, skits, songs, dance. And I've included in this package also a sample choice board that gives some of those ideas. Writing and performing a song, you know, doing a free-form dance, giving a speech, acting out a skit, any ways to get those kinesthetic kids and those kids who, even non-kinesthetic kids, up and moving and not sitting necessarily behind their keyboards. So some examples of teachers getting their kiddos moving. You'll see here that they've injected a brain break. So they click on the picture to choose one of the different movement videos, brain breaks they want. Down here, teachers actually, primary teachers actually getting the kids writing their sight words in shaving cream or oatmeal or cornmeal, or playing a game as an I Spy game as they're following along with a story. So trying to get the kids active and involved in the learning. This piece is a teacher who is teaching the movement of the earth and tracking shadows. So she's sending their kids out to track their shadows throughout the day. In this piece, and including some videos that they can also use, and even a poll that they can answer. So getting them engaged, getting them moving. And then this piece is a teacher who has challenged their students to do 40 minutes, 4 days a week of physical activity. They can come up with their own types of activity, or they can do some of his that he's talked to them about. And then he wants them in a discussion board to send them a message about what they're doing. You can include a picture, you can include a video, or you can simply, kind of type it into the box what you're doing to get moving. So we come to the part we've talked about our students, engaging our students, connecting our students, getting our students moving. But I think there's a really important piece that all of us need to attend to, teachers, parents, students, minding our mental health as well as our physical health, making sure that we're eating right, we're sleeping, we're taking breaks, we're enjoying some of the simpler things. And I've pulled a document for you. It's an infographic of our little ant friend here, and there's different pieces around him to think about how to foster your mental health while practicing the physical distance that we're supposed to have here. So I have given you a little screenshot of it, but this is the link to the entire document that gives some fantastic tips of how you can foster mental health as well as physical health. Also included in your package when you get this after this webinar are some different sites and different resources for items that will help you teaching your students during this time. So there's a website that's for not only educators but family and at-home workers with a whole list of resources to help you through this time. I've provided a link to some Google distance learning resources. You also have a couple of links to Georgia and Montana sites that have pulled together and packaged nicely some really good content across all subject areas and grade levels. I've also included some online museums and field trips that you can incorporate into your lessons with students, or perhaps you just want to give them as after-school activities for families to do, as well as a link to some creative activities for your students. Finally, the last two, here's an article on trauma-informed distance learning. And, the time that we're in creates some anxiety for students, for teachers, for parents. So it lists 4 priorities that we should think about as we're going through and teaching students. And those 4 are predictability, giving the students, some consistency, some predictability in unpredictable times. Flexibility in what we're asking kids to do and how we're asking them to do it. That connection piece, making sure we can establish and keep those connections. And empowerment. And empowerment was my favorite one because we can really empower kids during this time to do some great things. What a great time to do some real problem-solving tasks with the students, some real authentic learning. And then our last piece here, if you are using It's Learning, just a little quick video on how to use that Microsoft Teams piece to create meetings with your students. So I thank you for listening in today and joining our webinar, and I will open it up for any questions that might be percolating at the moment.
All right, Rachel, we do have one.
Yeah.
It says at the beginning, you mentioned adding more images and sounds to make it engaging. Can you please show some tips for doing that?
So I can talk about some tips for doing that. In the in the sites that I gave for some additional resources, there are sites to find images, to find videos. So for instance, if I'm teaching the causes of the Civil War, for instance, I may go to the Library of Congress to pull some primary source images that I can have the students view and analyze. I might pull music from that time period for them to listen to and analyze. I can also pull some nice quality videos that show the causes of the Civil War that the students can engage with, and then I can ask them to do certain things with that. But because I don't have that ability necessary to stand in the classroom and to give some of that instruction, the things that I pull in have to do some of that for me. So if I was teaching a lesson like that, I would pull images, primary source images. I would pull music from the time period. I would pull videos that detail, experts talking about this. I can also inject a video of myself talking and introducing the lesson. So the lessons become, kind of bright and, colorful and robust, if you will, by injecting all of those pieces in.
All right, thank you. No more questions right now.
Okay. And we have just about 5 minutes left. So while we're waiting to see if anybody else pops in with any questions, if you do have questions after the fact, briefing@itslearning.com, and we'll answer those questions. And then the link in the chat to past webinars as well as future webinars and their ability to register for those.
Rachel, not another question, but can you just share again what they'll be getting access to in the email the day after? Well, tomorrow, I guess it would be.
Yeah. So all of those documents that I made reference to, the interest inventory, I have trouble saying those two words for some reason. The interest inventory, the scavenger hunt document, the choice board, all those documents will be given to you that you can use as is or manipulate for yourselves. And all of the resources, the links to the resources on this page, you will be getting as well to use in your instruction.
Thank you. All right, we do have another question. On the discussion tool, is the teacher able to delete a student's comment if necessary?
Yes. That was a short answer.
It was, yeah. Yes, yes, you can.
Yeah, and
go
ahead.
I was just gonna say, I might suggest taking a screenshot maybe before you do in case you need it.
Nice idea, yeah. And I will say one thing about the discussion tool and also about the online meetings. One thing we can't take for granted is that the students know what to do in that situation. So, how to act in a discussion forum, how to act in an online meeting. So there's some teaching there that needs to be done. Here's what I expect your discussion post to look like. Here's what happens if you don't behave accordingly, as well as that online meeting, because I guarantee a lot of these kids have probably not sat on a Microsoft Teams meeting. So there is some discussion at the beginning of how I expect you to act during the meeting and interact with everyone. So I think we can't forget that sometimes our students don't necessarily know how they're supposed to act in an online situation, and we have to guide them in that.
A really good point. Sort of like in the classroom, right? Setting those expectations.
Absolutely. Yep, absolutely.
All right. Maybe give another minute, see if there's any other questions coming in.
Yeah. And I think we have just about 2 minutes left, so I'm going to just reiterate one more time, just like I do in the classroom. If you do have questions, briefing@itslearning.com, and then the link in the chat to the remote learning webinar series. If you missed some of our past webinars, you can certainly view the recordings and register for some of our future webinars. And if there are no more questions, I think we can call it a day and move on with the afternoon.
There's one last question. Is there a charge for It's Learning?
Yeah, so It's Learning is a software as service. So yes, there is a charge for It's Learning. And if you would like to find out more about that, what that process would look like to get It's Learning, please do send an email to briefing@itslearning.com and we can get in touch. I think that should probably do it since we only have about 1 minute left. All right, everybody, I think we'll call it. Scott, is there any other questions or are we good?
We are good.
All right, everybody. Again, thank you for joining the webinar. Stay safe out there, and good luck with your kiddos. I know you'll do great things. Bye, everyone.